So today we are doing godly goodbyes, and so one of the things, if you haven't heard of that before, one of the slots in our church calendar every year, we make sure that we make room for this, and partly it's because of the culture here in Cold Lake that there's so many people in and out. Right? There's not a long stay for a lot of people, and it's just the reality of life here in Cold Lake, and maybe a little bit less post-pandemic, a little bit. But it's still, people move quite quickly from Cold Lake, and if you've been here for any amount of time, you know that. And so if you've heard of someone who's been here for more than two years, it's like, oh, you're like a long time. You've been here a long time, right? It's just the nature of where we live, and it would be easier in some ways not to think about it. But I think one of the roles of your pastors is the formation of the people through the word and through building cultures. And so one of the cultures that we really want to build is this culture of blessing. And you can't just kind of shove stuff under the rug because it doesn't feel very nice, especially something significant like this where there's a lot of people coming in and out. And so how do you live like the scriptures tell us to live as Christians, as people who love God and love others and are meant to live in biblical community together? So why godly goodbyes? Well, also for a gospel understanding. And at the end of this message, we'll kind of bring this point together. We are a sent and sending people because our lives revolve around Jesus, the gospel, and his mission and purposes. And so I think that's such an important thing, that we need to have this understanding, not just an understanding, a mindset, a culture built that this is who we are. That we are a sent and sending people. And that is, I think, of utmost importance when it comes to living your life for Jesus. And so here's how we do this at Grand Center Alliance. First of all, if you're leaving, we'd love for you to tell us that. Send us an email, let us know, because we want to bless you. We want to pray for you, and we want to give you one of these beautiful lanterns. There's a few back here. And send you with a blessing. And part of the idea of the lantern is we want your light to shine wherever you're going, wherever you're going to land. And it's also a reminder that that's an important aspect of you leaving, that you're not just leaving behind something, you're going toward something, and you're taking that light with you. The presence of Jesus is with you. Secondly, it's an invitation for those who are moving here to Cold Lake to dive in, jump in. Listen to the stuff that for about the people who are leaving and apply it to, oh, well, I'm landing here. So these are some of the things that maybe I can do, or a way of thinking, or join in this culture of blessing that we're trying to create here. And finally, a reminder for those who have heard it many times. Like we said, it's a yearly thing. And for some of you, it's like, oh, it's godly goodbyes. Well, I've heard that before. It's like, yeah, me too. I've heard it lots. And yet I think it's just so important to be reminded again and again, this is where we live. And if we're gonna have this culture of blessing, and we have to be reminded that it's really important, some of these things that we're gonna go through, to keep that culture alive and kicking, I guess you could say. All right, so what about this culture of blessing? And I just want to go through a little intro here to kind of set some ideas for us, so as we get into the texts, the sermon, that we can think about through this lens. So creating a culture of blessing is not easy, right? It has to be intentional, and it's an intentional effort to become a people who bless. And that's difficult because we live in a culture, in a city, in a province, in a country, in a continent that's not the priority, right? It's more, we live in more of a culture of outrage, or a culture of fear. You're worried about making a mistake in case you get canceled or something. But that's kind of more pervasive what's going on. Or in the workplace, it's not a place of blessing, right? It's usually maybe a place of cursing. I'm not talking about swear words. I'm talking about just kind of like the way people talk to each other. There's not a lot of blessing going on. And so part of creating a culture of blessing in the church is we want people to come in here and kind of go, that you've got out of that pervasive culture out there, that it takes something away from us into a culture where you receive and give. Like it's just, yeah. Because the culture of blessing is so refreshing. I mean, who doesn't want to have that, be blessed, right? Being blessed by someone is awesome. Being blessed by God is even as awesomer a word it is today. It's better. And so here's some of just the little things that we do here just to help promote this is the coffee bar for one, and a greeter. Like it's just, we don't have to do that. And we could buy the cheapest coffee possible. And you're like, you don't? It's like, no, haven't you tried our coffee? It's really good. And so part of that is we want you to come in, and it's hospitality, right? If someone's coming into your home and you love coffee, you're probably going to serve them like a really awesome cup of coffee. And then you're going to wait and see if they like them. It's like, oh, and when they go like, oh, this is so good, you're just going to like, yeah, right? Yeah, of course it's good. And it's not just because you wanted to make them a good coffee. It's because you want them to feel like they matter, that you went through the trouble, that you matter. And that's why I want to give you this coffee that I handmade. And then benedictions. Like we have benedictions at the end of every sermon, or not the sermon, of the service. And it's not just because that's the way you're supposed to end the service. I mean, there's no, formula in the scripture here that says do this, 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 and then end like this. It's part of this culture of blessing that we really want. And you'll notice once in a while, we just say like, receive, put your hands out, get your body into this whole idea of let's receive this blessing. And so if you want to receive this, just put your hands out. So we'll do that from time to time, just as a reminder, like, hey, like posture yourself to receive this blessing. We want to bless you. It's not just nice words we're saying. Showing hospitality to others is so important. And so in our community group ministry, we'll often have host homes, and we want people to be hospitable to one another and show hospitality to each other. It's so important. It's so awesome. And again, that hospitality is just showing someone that they matter. I mean, that feels good, right? Someone notices you, and specifically that hospitality makes you feel like, oh, like I matter. And finally, living as Christ's representatives in our community. So we don't want to just hold it in here and be bless each other. And then once we get out there, it's kind of like dog eat dog, right? Just kind of like shield. We don't want to get hit by the whatever is coming your way. No, we want to be this type of person and that's hard, right? Because man, it's one thing to be a blessing in a specific location, every so often. But man, how do you be a blessing at home? Like that is, for me, that's like what? That is so hard, right? It's the place where you're most tired. It's the place where, you're just kind of let it go, let it all go. And it's like, well, how do I do that? That is tough. But that's the kind of people we're striving to be. We want to become like that. Because God's original idea and design was to create for himself a people to bless, and who would in turn bless others. Right from the get-go, when his idea of creating a people for himself. And we find this right in Genesis chapter 12 to Abram. And he says, in just verses 1-5, the Lord said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. So he didn't even know where he was going. It's like, okay. And he also didn't know this God. This is kind of the introduction to Yahweh. And here's the promise he makes. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. That sounds good. I will make your name great, and then what? You will be a blessing. Isn't that cool? So God's design right from the start, from building this people, from creating this people for himself, was so that he could pour out his blessing on them, and they in turn would bless all of the people around them. I think that's amazing. It's just a beautiful picture of who our God is. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. And now here comes more of a prophetic word where it's talking about Jesus here, where God's Yahweh is going like, hey, there's going to be something that you don't even get right now, or someone who's coming. And that, of course, we know is Jesus. And so this idea of a culture of blessing, and this is kind of the tracks that we want to run on here today. So I have three things that I want to talk about today. Scriptural principles that help us build this culture of blessing and this idea of godly goodbyes. And the first one is meaningful friendships need healthy grieving. It's really important. Nobody likes to grieve, and yet it is so important to grieve and to grieve in a healthy way. And so I want to tell a little bit of a story and go through a few things here in regards to this idea of meaningful friendships. And the story is found in 1 Samuel chapter 20. So here's the setting. We have David and Jonathan, who are best buddies. But Jonathan's father, King Saul, is not a big fan of David. And we find in earlier chapters that he has become very envious of David and David's reputation and has already tried to kill David. And so chapter 20 opens up with David going like, what in the world? He's talking to Jonathan. Why is your dad trying to kill me? What did I do? I've done all these things for him, and he's actually even his son-in-law. He married King Saul's daughter, and so he's just going like, "What in the world?" Maybe that was the issue, right? I just realized that. I'm just kidding. And so David and Jonathan are having this conversation. Jonathan's like, "No, and my dad isn't like that. And if there was something in his heart like that, he'd tell me." And David's like, "Pretty sure he's out to kill me." Right? And so I just can imagine this would have been humorous if you could just, fly on the wall kind of thing, watch and listen to these guys kind of argue back and forth. And David's going like, no, he's trying to kill me. And Jonathan's going like, you're crazy, dude. Why would my dad want to kill you? You're like one of his best soldiers. And so they have this little thing, and Jonathan's not convinced. And then David's fully convinced that King Saul is out to kill him. And so they decide to devise this little test. And David kind of goes, hey, how does this sound? The festival of the new moon is happening. It's a feast. I'm supposed to sit at the king's table. How about I don't? Right? So obviously David is coming up with a plan. How about I just don't go? And then if my absence is noticed by the king, tell him that I went to sacrifice some family business and do some sacrifices in Bethlehem. And Jonathan's like, oh okay. All right, let's do it. Let's see what happens. And so, David kind of says, like, there's one step between me and death here with your father. And so this is the plan. And so they devise this plan and they figure out, well, where are you going to go? So he says, well, I'm going to hide in this field. Like, I'm just going to go out here. Maybe there's a big rock out there. I don't know. He's going to hide behind the rock. And he said, well, come out after and let me know. And Jonathan's like, okay, so I'll bring my bow and arrow, and I'll shoot an arrow, and I'll bring a young boy with me to get the arrow. And if I say, oh, it's beyond you, that means things went bad and King Saul lost his marbles and you're in trouble. If I say, oh, it's over to the side, then everything's okay and you can come out behind the rock from behind your hiding spot. And so the new moon feast come. David's chair is empty. King Saul notices. Like, where's David? He should be here. This is an important feast. His chair is very obviously empty. And that's Jonathan's cue. And so Jonathan goes, David asked me if he could go and make sacrifice with family, do some family business, and I gave him permission. And King Saul goes nuts. He is so angry and calls Jonathan some horrible names. And I was just reading through the text in the NIV. I'm like, I wonder what the Hebrew equivalent of these is, because he's probably swearing at him and cursing him out, right? And so it's interesting because the text says, until King Saul threw a spear at Jonathan, that was the moment that he knew that his dad, his father, was trying to kill David. It wasn't until then. So the rage, everything, and just at the moment where King Saul actually tried to pin his son to the wall with a spear. Jonathan knew this is not good. My father is out to harm David. And so Jonathan actually fasted the rest of the day and was just in mourning. It's just awful because of the shame of what King Saul, his father, had done or was planning to do. And so I can imagine Jonathan trudging out to the field, going like, oh, this is brutal. I really, really don't want to do this. I can't imagine the pain in his heart. David, on the other hand, he's hiding. He's probably like, what's going on? When's Jonathan coming? What happened? I wonder. Pretty sure that King Saul's mad. And so Jonathan brings a young boy with him and shoots the arrow and says, I think it's beyond you. So the young boy grabs the arrow, brings it back, and Jonathan says, off with you, go back home. And so when the coast is clear, David comes out. And I can imagine the heart, the sadness, the heartfelt pain between these two because they are best friends, deep, deep friendship. And so this is how the story ends in 1 Samuel chapter 20. After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone. Oh, it was a stone. There you go. And bowed down before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. They then kissed each other and wept together. But David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever. Then David left, and Jonathan went back to town. So you can feel the power of that goodbye, right? There's something very significant, heart-wrenching between these two friends, probably grown up together. There'd been a bond created between these guys. And so it's along this idea of meaningful friendships need healthy grieving. Here's the deal. It makes it very difficult, right? The goodbye becomes very difficult when you make those close friendships, especially this idea of biblical friendship, because you're not just sharing friendship, you're sharing a part of you that's deeper than your average friendship. You're going deeper and intentionally deeper in biblical community with other people. You have shared experiences, learning and growing together in the faith, walking closely, right, through difficult times with people and through times of rejoicing. And so you create these incredible deep bonds in the family of God. And others, walking closely with others inevitably causes pain and sadness when they move. And so it's really hard. And some of you may have friends that are moving or are moving away from Cold Lake, and it's kind of like, this is actually even hard to hear. It's hard I don't really want to think about this right now because it invokes pain, right? But it's okay to be sad. In fact, it's important. When things are sad, we need to be sad. When important things happen that are disappointing or that cause that sadness, we need to allow the sadness out. We need to be sad. It's important. It's one of the indicators that there was some real, true biblical community, or in the very least, a very close friendship. So it was meaningful. If it's not meaningful, you won't feel anything. You just be like, see you later. I'm out of here. And that's, of course, the indicator that you didn't engage in biblical community, that you didn't go deep with people, that you didn't become vulnerable and open, and you were guarding your heart. Maybe because you've moved around a lot, and you're like, oh, I know how this goes. You go in, you get some good friends, and then you leave, and then I have to go through the pain again. But it's really, really important to grieve. And making those kind of statements to yourself, I'm not going to be hurt like this again. It's actually that's how you build strongholds. You make these vows. This isn't going to happen to me again. And you build a stronghold, and it's relationally devastating for you in your other relationships. And so you need to be sad. So these meaningful friendships, they deserve it. Right? If you have a meaningful, deep relationship with somebody, You need to grieve. It's really important because it was meaningful and that person really mattered to you, or those people. And so you need to have that healthy grief. And the flip side of it is that you suppress it. But suppressing your grief or your sadness or any emotions, really, ultimately, it's a thief. It robs you of things. And so it robs both parties of these fond memories that you've shared together. It mars them because it hurts when you think about them. If you just suppress and then you don't want to think about them. It robs you of relational health. It robs you of facing reality because you don't want to feel those things. And then ultimately, it robs you of the ability to re-engage in healthy relationship and deep biblical community with other people. And so there's a consequence that pushing your grief or sweeping it under the rug and just refusing to think about it. And I know it's painful. I've experienced this a lot. I've been here for many years, and we've said goodbye to lots of really close friends that we just love so much. And it's hard to do that. And so my encouragement to you is don't hide the grief. Go through it. It's important. It's important for that relationship. It's important for you. Secondly, is love the place you're in. This is a harder one. And I have this one story I've told multiple times here, but I know there's lots of people that, again, we live in a community where lots of people come and go. So I'm going to tell it anyway. When I was going to Mount Royal, my whole life was set on being involved in something in the sciences. And, I love science, and that was my goal. And the call to ministry was really strong, and God was pulling me away from it, and I did not want to go. I did not want to be a pastor for sure. Pastors are weird. I usually say pastors were weird to me, but now I'm like, no, they are weird. I'm weird. So, but I'm like, oh man, it's so awkward running into a pastor. I was like, I don't want to be one of those guys. And so eventually I said, okay. And I went back to Regina to finish my degree, and found out I only had one class left to finish my bachelor's, and so decided or from the registrar, she's like, try the seminary. And I'm like, seminary? That's like, we used to joke at being the cemetery because everybody seems so serious and dead there. And I'm like, okay. And then found out I just loved it. It was so cool. But I really struggled with going back to Regina. I did not want to go to Regina. I did not like Regina. I thought it was terrible. I referred to it and sorry if you love Regina, I referred to it as like the armpit of Canada because it's just down the road from the elbow. Anyway, if you know Elvis, Saskatchewan. And I was just grumpy, grouchy. I did not want to be there. Well, there was a retreat. The seminary was holding a retreat, and the speaker was speaking from Jeremiah 29. And it really impacted me. And he was talking about loving the place you're in. And I was so convicted. I remember going outside, and I was leaning against this massive rock. And we were in Dallas Valley, so it's actually really beautiful. But I couldn't see anything beautiful there. And so I just remember going like, God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Like just arrogance or whatever it is that you think you're better than Regina. I don't know how you could think that, but we do. And so as I'm leaning to the rock, I just felt God's presence. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I remember opening my eyes, and I just felt warmth. And I looked around, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I was looking at incredible beauty that I hadn't even seen because of the perspective that I had of where it was and the funk I was in. And it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. And from that moment on, I'm like, I'm not going to hate Regina. And now Regina it's still many, many years later, I have a soft spot for Regina. I love Regina. What an awesome place. And there's such beauty there. And I couldn't see it because of my perspective. I tell the story because I want you to kind of grasp a little bit how important it is to understand and be one of God's people and love the place you're in. It's so important. And so Here's the passage that was taught, oh, I don't even know how many years ago. A long time ago. It was in the 90s, so 1990s. Some of the kids are like, 1890s? He's old. And we want to talk about Jeremiah. The people of Israel are in exile. Babylon has come and taken them away. And we have these false prophets that continually are prophesying, oh, you'll come back. It's just a short stay in Babylon. And God is telling Jeremiah, no, 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 no. And the prophets are like, don't get too comfortable. We're gonna get out of, God's going to get us out of Babylon right away. And so Jeremiah writes to the exiles. He writes a letter with a message from God. And this is the message found in Jeremiah 29. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. What did he say? I have sent. He's taking credit for that. It's awesome. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there. Do not decrease. So he's telling them, live your life like you normally would. Don't change kind of our way of life simply because you're in a different place. Keep living like this. And why? Well, here he tells them why. But seek the welfare of the city. What's so significant about this is Babylon. The enemy, the one who, the city, the king, the kingdom that brought them into exile. And God is going like, no, we don't hate them. You're actually going to seek the welfare of the city. That's mind-blowing, and you can imagine how people would have received this at the times. Like, are you kidding? Yeah, okay. Nice one, Jeremiah. And Jeremiah had a hard time, right? Because of this, one of the messages, but because of what he preached. He went through some really difficult times. And so, let's just continue in the text here. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you, there's sent again, into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. So seek its welfare and pray to the Lord on its behalf. Again, it's Babylon. Wow. For in its welfare, you will find your welfare. So as you set out to bless the place you're in, you will be blessed. Is that not a cool promise? I'm like, wow. And in Babylon, of all places. And so seek the welfare of the city, for in its welfare, you will find your welfare. So this idea is, and this is kind of a saying, maybe you've never heard of it, but live in Babylon with the Babylonians, but don't become Babylonian, right? And so we have an entire book in the Bible, Daniel, that is outlined, that is actually the fulfillment of Jeremiah 29. This is how you live in this foreign land as an exile. Daniel and his 3 companions. And in the New Testament, it's when Jesus is praying for his followers, he doesn't want them to be of the world, but he doesn't want them to be out of the world. And so it's in the world, but not of the world, in John chapter 17. So learn to love the place you're in. Thirdly, and we've been keying in on this quite a bit, live like you've been sent. See, we have a tendency to forget about God in the midst of all of these things. And we kind of think it's our decisions and all the things that are happening to us are maybe circumstance or coincidence. And it's not intentional most of the time. Like we just forget that God, about his sovereignty and how everything belongs to him. And he's got all these plans. We just it's so hard actually to kind of remember that, is it not? Especially when you're faced with all the stuff that's right in front of your face. How do you do that? And yet, we're called over and over to have this kind of perspective that God places people where he wants them, that he sent the people into exile, that it wasn't just a bad thing that happened, that it was all part of his plan. So This is what Jesus did. Throughout the Gospels, what we see is Jesus discipling his disciples. And ultimately, what is he doing? He's preparing them to be sent. And so it's not like we would do in university where we send our kids to university. They go through 4 to 10 years, whatever they're in or more, and then they come back and then they go out, then they're sent. This is a different strategy. So we see in the Gospels that as Jesus is preparing them, the disciples are being sent, being sent, being sent. But this is Jesus' goal, this whole idea, this preparation. And we have multiple occasions, Jesus hints, not just hints, sometimes it's just like overt, just right out there, that he is preparing his disciples to continue his mission after his death. In fact, that was the expectation in those days for a rabbi's disciples. You would continue on those traditions when the rabbi, or when you graduated or whatever they would call it, from this rabbi that you sat under, that you were discipled under. That was the tradition, and you'd carry it on. And so Jesus was a rabbi, and he was passing on something to his disciples to continue when he left. And so this is in John 20, this is how he says it. On the evening of that day, the first day of the week, and this is after Jesus' death and resurrection, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you." Right? So as Jesus was a sent one as well. And now he's sending them. In fact, that's where we get the word apostle. It means sent one. And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit." So what we see is ultimately this idea of being discipled and discipleship. It's preparation. It's preparation to be sent, and not someday. It's this continual sending for us. In fact, you could even see it like being sent out on Sunday at noonish, right? You're being sent every week back into our culture, back into your workplaces, and back into your schools, wherever it is, you're being sent again. And we need to live like we've been sent, because we have been sent. As disciples of Jesus, we have been sent. And so we need to live like this. So here's how James kind of talks about this idea, or this kind of mindset or way of thinking. So in James chapter 4, James says, "Now listen, you who say, 'Today or tomorrow we will go do this, or go to this or that city. Spend a year there, carry on business, and make money.'" Does that say Cold Lake in there? Oh, it must be a different translation. Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist. Now he's pulling from Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, right? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes, poof, like smoke. Instead, you ought to say, "If it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or do that." Now, he's not spiritualizing things here. He's actually trying to shift perspective to God's sovereignty and who he is, that you are a people who have been sent, and your mission is to do the mission and purposes that God has for you, that he's laid out for his people. And so it's not this kind of spiritualizing, like, oh, right? And it's not an excuse not to make plans, right? It's like, awesome, I don't have to make any plans. It'll just, whatever happens, happens. Right? That's not what's going on there either. It's this shift in perspective and a reminder that God's presence is with you. It's not just you wandering around deciding stuff and going places. The presence of God is with you. All right, so Bob isn't here, but his most favorite part. So what? There you go. If you don't know who Bob is, he's one of our other pastors here. So, and he likes to do this. So what, right? I do it. I just don't usually say it. All right. So what? So here's just the challenge and the reminder together. If you're staying, leaving, or coming, don't suppress your grief. Right? Grieve well. Don't suppress your grief, as it will steal your joy, your health, and your ability to form close friendships, because you'll always have that, I don't want to get hurt. This isn't going to happen again. I know it's hard. I've been living here for a long time. But we need to do this. We need to grieve well to show that person how much they matter to you. It's important. Right? And if you're leaving, like there's this, okay, so a great example was Steve Kane is only a couple months ago. And so there's this mixture of excitement about going to the new place and grief about leaving behind all of these close friendships, his church body, right? So there was, both of these things are at play, and it's actually important to allow both of those things out, because what happens sometimes is, because you don't want to feel bad, because you know people are disappointed that you're leaving, you'll just kind of do the good stuff, right? Oh, and you'll just be all excited, and so it's just even harder for them to go, like, because it feels like a dagger. They're just leaving us behind. We don't matter. So it's important, if you're leaving, to be reminded that both are important. It's okay to be excited about where you're going, of course, but don't allow that to overshadow the importance of the relationships that you've had here, right? Allowing and grieving with, allowing that pain and grief to be with you. It's hard to leave, but it's important to grieve. It benefits the body. It benefits us all when we do that well. Those bonds of friendship are important and deserve the grief. Secondly, learn to love the place you land, wherever you're going. So when you get there, kind of like, okay, what makes this place awesome? Like, you ask people, like, so what is it about or even before you go, you can even Google it, right? What is it that makes this place special? What sticks out here? Doesn't matter where you're going on earth, right? It could be, who knows where. If you're going way up north, it could be like the endless nights or endless days now, where you have to have a whole, system of going to sleep because your body doesn't produce melatonin because it's so bright. Like, it's just there, but there's some really cool things about anywhere on the planet that you go. And so look into it. Learn to love the place that you're in. Allow God to open your eyes to the beauty that's all around you. And for some of you who have come to Cold Lake, I mean, this is maybe one of those messages you need to hear too, that you need to love this place. You may not have wanted to come here, but it's an amazing place. Allow God to open your eyes to the beauty, not just of his creation, but of the people here. The people here are amazing. Form those close friendships. Like, be intentional about that kind of stuff. And look to be a blessing to the community you're going to. Right? You want to continue that culture of blessing. And it's not about getting them to do some programs that, well, my church did this when, those aren't helpful. Right? You're in a different culture, and especially to people who have been there for a long time, and they've built whatever culture they're on. And sometimes they need, they just need some ideas, and that's fine. But one of the strategies going into a new community is to actually be what you've learned, rather than just trying to replicate it in everybody else because it was so cool for you. Is just be. If you want to be a blessing, learn how to do it. It's just sometimes just some small things. Be a blessing to your community and your community of faith. I know it's hard when you're new, right? Because you're not trusted, or especially if you go to a church that doesn't have a lot of movement, right? So there's people that have been there for eons. That makes it a little bit more difficult. And finally, the challenge is live like you've been sent, because you have. We need to live this life. We need to have this perspective. Right? And we've been going through Colossians, and Colossians chapter 3, it says, Christ, who is your life? It's pretty clear, right? So what's your life about? James asks the question, so what is your life? Well, Jesus. My life is Jesus. And so we need to have this perspective because it is a game changer. And I think God gave me that experience in Regina because he wanted to do that in my life. He wanted to open my eyes to the beauty around him, whether it's people, the place, the geography, the whatever it is that God opens your eyes up to. Allow that to happen. Allow yourself to love. It isn't a slight against the old place that you loved. You can still love that. Right? So I like to leave it like this. You have this baby and you're just kind of, how could I love a human more than this? Right? You have this new child and it's like, whoa. And then you have a second child. And you're like, oh, well, my capacity for love has to go up, right? I can't just divide it now. That's part of growth, right? That God has done to us, that he gives us the capacity to love more. And so now we love these two children. And so you can love the place that you came from and maybe multiple places. And what I love is to hear stories about people. We were here and they tell you the awesome things about there. And then they were here and you tell me, like, you can just tell they just loved each place and lived like that. And that part of it, these two things are just like mixed, right? Loving the place you're in and being sent. There's just perspective. And take what you've been given here and continue it, right? You've been here for a purpose. God's brought you to Cold Lake for a purpose. It wasn't just an accidental move or, some guy wanted to, or one of your bosses wanted to move you because he just thought, maybe being a Christian, you're a nuisance or something. I don't know. That's not, right? If God is taking credit for sending the people to Babylon, right? I sent them. Could not God do that? Is he not sending you? Has he not sent you here? And so this is of the utmost importance, to live like you've been sent because you have. So here's a blessing that we've developed over the years that we do at the end of this sermon. And so I want to bless you with it. We'll get two blessings today because we'll do a benediction to close the service as well. And so this is a prayer and a benediction at the end of this sermon. Now may our Lord Jesus Christ himself and our God and Father, who loved us and gave us eternal comfort and good hope through grace, comfort your hearts and establish them in every good work and word. May the word of the Lord speed ahead of you and be honored by you. And may God watch over you and protect you from evil. May he establish you and guard you against the evil one. May the Lord direct your hearts to the love of God and to the steadfastness of Christ Jesus. And may you be a blessing to your new city by intentionally seeking and praying for its welfare.